Before watching this video, I recommend that you watch the video on is spelling important. The link is here. Now, this video is about a simple question. Why is spelling difficult? Well, let me go through a bit of history with you. To start with, I hear that statement quite often. English is the most difficult language in the world. Question. True or false? Is it true that English is the most difficult language in the world, or is it false? What do you think? And the answer to that question is false. English is not the most difficult language in the world. It is actually easier for a French person, like myself, to learn English than it is for a Korean to learn English. However, it is easier for a Korean to learn Chinese than it is for a French person to learn Chinese. Why? Well, because English and French have a lot in common. Korean and Chinese also have a lot in common. Apparently, more than half of the Korean vocabulary is of Chinese origin. Well, what about English and French? Let's have a quick look at that. Consider the following. According to Finkelstein and Wolff, who analyze the language of common words, 28.3% of English words are of French origin. So if you think about it, that means that as a French person, I should know about 28% of English words just by being French, because we share the same number of words. Another figure for you, 28.24% of English words are of Latin origin, which is interesting because French is from Latin. So because French is from Latin, there are quite a few words of Latin origin that I should know being French. So theoretically, if we have 28% of French origin and another 28% of Latin origin, a French person should know about 50% of the English vocabulary, theoretically. So English and French have quite a lot of common. That's why it is easier for me as a French person to learn English. Now, for your information, it's not just French and Latin that makes up the English language. I mean, 25% of English words come from Old and Middle English, Old Norse, and Dutch origin. 25%. Otherwise, 5.32% of Greek origin, 3.28% derived from proper name. Now, what do we mean by derived from proper name? Well, for example, there was a French politician in the 18th century called 𝙀𝙤𝙜𝙜𝙜 and his name, Silhouette, has entered the English language to refer to a certain way of drawing a silhouette. So silhouette has become a common word, a common noun in the English dictionary. But that word comes from the actual name of the person, 𝙀𝙤𝙜𝙜𝙜. Proper nouns are names of people or names of places. And some of these names have become a common word in the English language. So apparently 3.28% of English words come from names of places or names of people, like silhouette. And 1% from any other languages. Now, when I say that as a French person, I should know about 50% of the English vocabulary, I would even add that you as an English person, you should know about, quite a few words from the French language as well. Maybe same thing, maybe half of it from the French language. So you should know quite a lot of French words as well. But it's not that straightforward. It's not that straightforward because, to start with, there are some words we don't share the same spelling of. Like parlement and parliament. Parliament, English, French parlement, they come from the same word, but different spelling. And we have some words that we call false friends. The best way to explain what a false friend is by giving you an example, like college. College, there's an equivalent word in French, collège. But college and collège, even though it's got the same spelling except about the accent in French, or otherwise some letters, college and collège, they don't refer to the same type of things. A college in France is a secondary school from year 7 to year 10. And then after year 10, from year 11 to year 13, you go to lycée. So college is not a college. That could be a bit confusing. In the same way, a library is not like a library. A library in France is a bookshop. Library is a bit different. And the word decade. Decade in France refers to 10 days, not 10 years as it is here. Having said that, Henriette Walter, in her book On histoire qui m'a réponse, actually gives a list of 3,221 words that have the same spelling in both English and French, as well as the same meaning or meanings. That's quite impressive. 3,221 words. Same spelling, same meaning. Pronunciation could be a bit different though. For example, violence. You all know what violence is. What is violence? Violence is a word that you use. Violence is a word that is in the English dictionary, but you don't say violence. Violence is how the French say the word violence. Violence, violence. Mean the same spelling, but different pronunciation. And that's a good illustration as to the issue we have with spelling. Two different pronunciations for a word with the same spelling in both languages and the same meaning. To explain why spelling is what it is today, I'm going to give you a task. And for that task, you need a pen and paper. So pause the video while finding a pen and paper, and then come back to resume the video. Right, are you ready? What I'm going to do is giving you some words. I'm going to tell you some words. I would like you to spell these words however you want, however you think they are spelled. It's up to you, okay? Just spell them however you want. There is a purpose for it, so don't panic, don't worry, everything is fine. It's not a spelling test. Are you ready? Right. Try to spell this word. Quen. I'll say it again. Quen. Second word. Knecht. I'll say it again. Knecht. Third one. Chilled. Say it again. Chilled. Fourth one. Chief. I'll say it again. Chief. Chief. And the last one. Debitum. I'll say it again. Debitum. Right. Let's start with our first word. Quen. How did you spell quen? Did you spell quen with a QU by any chance? Or like here, CW, CWEN, with that accent over the E? That way? Or did you use a QU? Quen is actually an Old English word. And when I say Old English is an English language that was spoken from about 650 to 1100. Roughly. So quen existing during that time. The word quen existing during that time. And then in 1066, there was a guy called William, Duke of Normandy in France, who decided to invade England and brought with him, during his invasion, some scribes, French scribes or Norman scribes. And these Norman scribes used their own writing system to write the English words that they heard at that time. And by doing that, they decided to use their own spelling system. not using, the writing system of the English scribes of that time. They were French, or we use our own system. That's how we should write these words. Ta-da, 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 no choice. So CW with the French scribes became QU. Quen actually gave the modern word queen. So queen, QU, W-E-N, you have to thank the Norman scribes of that time for that spelling, QU. Now, the K sound that you find in quen, represented by the letter C, you find it in our second word, knecht. Now, you may find knecht quite hard to spell. You may be wondering, how do I spell that? Especially the H sound. What's that? Knecht was written this way. C-N-I-H-T. Again, it's an old English word that has a modern spelling. Could you actually guess the modern spelling of that word? What knecht is in modern English? I'll tell you in a moment. The issue we have with quen, knecht, and other words is that people at that time, in Old English period, they didn't have a standardized spelling. They spelled words however they wanted, how it sounded to them. So to tell you the truth, however you spell quen or knecht, if you were living before 1100 in England, your spelling will be correct, because they spelled it however they want. There was no standardized spelling. Actually, there were no standardized spelling before 1500. So before 1500, you could spell your words however you wanted. So however you spell quen or knecht is correct. In a nutshell, it is correct. There's no standard spelling. In the text that we have today with that spelling of quen or knecht, C-N-I-G-H-T, that spelling has influenced our modern spelling. So quen influenced the modern spelling of queen through the Norman writing system, QU. Knecht became the modern knight, K-N-I-G-H-T. You get that one? That explains why we've got a K in knight, even though we don't say it. That K in knight, that represents an abandoned K sound that we used to have well in the past. So the letter K is a remnant of an old pronunciation of knecht that we no longer say. The letter GH in modern knight is a remnant of the H sound. And I believe it's again the Norman scribes who changed the spelling to GH. So when in Old English it was H for the H sound, with the Normans it became GH. And you actually found that in the word enough, GH, but enough was also said with a H sound, enoch. Now when I say H sound, it's like the Spanish jota. If you know Spanish, they've got the jota sound, or a bit like the Scottish loch, L-O-C-H, loch. So that's, the H sound. So Old English had that sound, modern English no longer has that sound. It's evolved, that sound dropped. So what it dropped in modern English, the spelling actually keeps a remnant of an old sound. So the GH is to say there was a H sound in the past in night and enough. Except that in night we no longer have GH, no longer represents any sounds whatsoever, just silence is just there. But enough, the GH has become a first sound. So the H sound in enough the х sound in enoch has become a f sound in enough. So words have evolved differently throughout centuries. Another change we've got is that letter I. That letter I, nicht, was an E sound, which is now an I sound in night. And that affected a lot of one-syllable words, short words, sometimes two syllables, but a lot of short words had an E sound, and that E sound became an I sound. It's not the only letter that has been affected, it's not the only sound that has been affected. A R sound, for example, became an A sound. That happened during what the linguists call the Great Vowel Shift. Now, the Great Vowel Shift is not something that happened overnight at all. And it happened in different periods of times throughout the UK. So it didn't happen in the whole of the UK at the same time at once at all. The Great Vowel Shift actually started around 1350 and lasted up to the 18th century. So it took a long time to have these changes. You can find the difference in pronunciation. Like I mentioned, the R sound became an A sound. For example, the Middle English word nature. Nature. Nature became, in modern English, nature. The R of nature became A sound. Nature became nature. But we still have the R sound in natural. So we now have nature with the R sound for A and natural with the original R sound. Nature, natural. It's not the only word like that. Let's have a look at a third word that asks you to spell. The word chilled. How did you spell chilled? You spell chilled like C-H-I-L-L-E-D, or do you spell chilled like child? Chilled was spelled this way. C-I-L-D, sometimes put a dot on top of the C to show a ch sound. A chilled, you guessed it, gave the modern English word child. Chilled became child. Yes, we had the E sound in Old English with chilled, and that E sound became I in child. And that also explains why we've got a difference in pronunciation between child and the plural of child, which is children. Child, children. In the same way, we've got nature, natural, because the R sound became an A sound. We've got child and children, because the E sound became an I sound in child, but the E sound stays in children. So in modern English, the ch sound is represented by the letter CH. Having said that, CH does not always represent the ch sound. CH could represent a sh sound as well. But I'm going to go further into that one a bit later, because I'd like to pause a moment to ask myself that question. Why keeping the spelling of an old way of saying the words? I mean, you know, we had knecht, we still have, a remnant of an old sound, the K and the GH for the R sound, the knecht. We've got chilled, the E sound in chilled or knecht is with an I that you found in child or night. So we've got a change of pronunciation, but the spelling hasn't changed. Why are we keeping an old spelling here with our modern English words? Why? Well, the issue we've got here is when the printing press came to England in 1476. A guy called William Caxton brought the printing press. He had the difficult task, Caxton, and any other people who then brought a printing press after Caxton. They had the difficult task of actually deciding on what spelling to use. Now, why do I say the difficult task? Because, as I mentioned earlier, there were different spellings for the same words all over the UK. So, which spelling should you use in your book? Because once you've got a printing press, then you want to use a standardized spelling, a standard spelling, the spelling for that word every single time. And that's how spelling became standardized. Not just with the printing press, actually. There are other forces there were other forces we need to take into account because the government started to want a standard spelling as well at that time. But with the printing press is, the quick way of vehiculate, of spreading the spelling of words. So we've got William Caxton with his printing press in 1476, who wanted to print books and needed to decide on the spelling of words, like any others of his contemporaries who ended up having a printing business as well. So, what spelling should they use? The printing press of William Caxton, was in London. So, naturally, William Caxton decided to use the spelling of words that he hears around London, where he was. So he used the type of pronunciation that he heard in London, and from that type of pronunciation, he used the spelling that represented the sound of that time. And that's how spelling started to be standardized. It's not that straightforward though, because there are mismatches with spelling and pronunciation. The word busy, for example, B-U-S-Y. Why do we say busy? It's busy, a dialect that wasn't from London, but the spelling of busy is from London. It's weird. So you end up with words that are spelled in one part of a country, but said with a pronunciation of a different part of the country, weirdly enough. It's quite strange, but anyway, we don't always understand the logic behind it, but we end up with the spelling of that word. And the thing is, during the time of Caxton, we still said knecht, and we still said chilled. So knecht and chilled became spelled how it was said at that time. But once we've got a standard spelling of the word, it's difficult to change that spelling. Pronunciation evolves very much more quickly than spelling. Spelling tends to be set in stone, shall I say. It's difficult to change spelling. Americans try that, or some Americans try that. They did manage to change some of the spelling of their words, like color, C-O-L-O-R instead of C-O-L-O-U-R. But in effective, very small number of words, the American spelling reform. Very small number of words. The spelling we still use today is an inheritance of spelling we had during Caxton time and his successors between 1476 and 1650, which is the time when spelling became quite standard. By 1650, English spelling became standard. And from then, we didn't change much how we spell our words. Now, it's not just the evolution of pronunciation that explains why the spelling is different from how we say the words. Why we've got a child, the letter I for the I sound and the letter I for E sound in children. That's due to the evolution of pronunciation. But there are other forces at work here. There are other forces at work in relation to other types of spelling. We also owe the spelling of some words from other countries, from other languages. Let's take our fourth word that I asked you to spell, TF. How did you spell TF? Did you spell TF like chief? If you spelled TF like chief, then well done, that's correct, because TF became chief with a different pronunciation. But the thing is, the word TF is not English. The word TF is French, Old French. The word TF entered the English language in the Middle Ages, and TF became chief in modern English, while the Old French TF became chef in modern French language. So the word TF, the Old French word TF, became chief through the phonetic system, through the pronunciation system of the English chief, and the French pronunciation system is a bit different from the English pronunciation system. So in France, it became chef. Old French used to have the ch sound, but then we dropped that t in ch. So ch in modern French now represent the sh sound. Ch sh in French, while it is ch with a t sound ch in English. But then the English decided to actually borrow the modern French word chef in the 19th century, actually. In the 19th century, they took the modern French word chef. Not only did they take the spelling of the word chef, C-H-E-F, which is the modern French spelling, so they also took the pronunciation of that word, chef. So now, when you've got the head of a kitchen, we call him chef. Not chef, with the t sound, he's chef. Not chef, he's chef. Chef is actually a French pronunciation. It's not the only word with a sh sound. We've got other words in English with a sh sound spelled ch, like charade, machine, chivalry, and nonchalant. So that explains why you've got a sh sound for these words and not a ch sound despite the spelling of ch. Two different pronunciation systems, one from England, one from France. Now, ch could also be a k sound, and usually, but not all words, but quite a lot of words with a k sound represented by the ch letters are of Greek origin. For example, mechanic, chemistry, character, psychology, and chrome. All these words are of Greek origin. As I mentioned, not all ch words that have the sound k are of Greek origin, but a lot of them are. Why ch for a k sound and not the letter k? I don't have an answer for that one. I don't know. French, Latin, Greek, they are not the only foreign languages that had words entering the English language. For example, pajamas is from Hindi, a language in India, pajamas. Ketchup is from Chinese, ketchup, not sure how to say that word. Karaoke is from Japanese, kara-oke, which means empty orchestra. Chocolate is from Spanish chocolate, but then the Spaniards took their word chocolate from a language of South America, Nahuatl. Chocolatol or cacahuatl, not sure how to say this word, but either from Nahuatl, chocolatol or cacahuatl. Alligator is from Spanish, el lagarto de Indias. Now the Spaniards call that animal el lagarto de Indias. El lagarto de Indias means literally the lizard of the Indies. But then the English took just el lagarto And alligator, they dropped the Indies, alligator became alligator. So alligator literally means originally the lizard. Balcony, the word balcony is from Italian balcone, and so on and so on. There are many more examples. We still borrow words from other languages, even today. For example, in 2021, 26 Korean words were added to the Oxford English Dictionary. 26 Korean words, such as kimbap, which is the name of a dish, manhwa, which is a Korean comic book, or mukbang. Mukbang, which is a video that features a person eating a large quantity of food and talking to the audience. The spelling and pronunciation of some words are then influenced by the spelling of the original word from a foreign country, especially when it is taken directly from the foreign country. When I say when it is taken directly from the foreign country, it's because before spelling became standardized, that word evolved, like chef became chief or became chef in France. However, when we took a word directly from Latin or Greek or from the other countries, in a time when spelling became standardized, like think about all the inventions we had in the 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, we discovered a lot of things. We discovered new elements. We discovered countries. We discovered new plants, new animals, and we created new machines, and all these needed names. So when we name these new plants, these new animals, these new machines, these new creations, we took inspiration from either Latin or Greek. So we took directly from Latin, directly from Greek to make these new words, or directly from the original language. Hence, chocolate, directly from Nahuatl. Now, taking a word directly from foreign language in a time when spelling became standardized, then the spelling of the original word has become standardized in the English language. Sometimes we've got strange things happening. What do I mean by that? Well, let's have a look at our last word I asked you to spell. Debitum. How did you spell debitum? Debitum. Debitum is a Latin word and it's spelled this way. D-E-B-I-T-U-M with an accent over the E, a line over the E. Debitum. What is debitum? Debitum became, in modern English, debt. D-E-B-T. Having said that, debitum, that became debt, debitum, it wasn't taken directly from Latin. That word was not taken directly from Latin. The word debt comes from Old French, and Old French comes from Latin. So debitum in Old French became debt, D-T. Then the English took that word debt entered the English language. So in Old English, we had the word debt spelled D-E-T-T-E. No B sound at all. No B sound at all. Debt was an Old English word, D-E-T-T-E. So you will think that if the Old English word of debt is D-E-T-T-E, then the spelling will be like, D-E-T-T-E, like that, wouldn't be changed to anything else. So why have we got to be in debt in Old English if we never even said the B sound? Even in modern French, we have that word debt. We don't have a B in debt in modern French at all. In modern English, you do. What happened? What happened is, well, there were some people in the 17th century, some scholars in the 17th century, who decided to have some words look more Latin. Why did they decide to have words more Latin? Because Latin was like the language of reference. it was a language you were in awe with, and the closer you could be to Latin, the, in inverted commas, the better your language was. So there was some type of sacrality to the Latin language. And because of that, some scholars decided that some of these words that are of Latin origin originally should look more Latin. So because det comes from Latin debitum, then these scholars in the 17th century disregarded the old spelling of det, D-E-T-T-E, as it was in Old English, and decided to put a B in there, D-E-B-T. So we've got a B in det today now, owing to these scholars in the 17th century who wanted the word det to look more Latin. Because debitum had a B in Latin. It's not the only word that have an extra letter, because the scholars in the 17th century decided to add one for them to look more Latinate or more Latin. Plumber is one of them, plumber from Latin plumbarium. Another one is adventure. Now, what's interesting about adventure is adventure doesn't come directly from Latin. It actually comes from French, Old French again. Aventure. And when the English language had that word to start with, the first time, aventure, there were no D in that word. So in Old English and Middle English, there were no D in aventure at all. We didn't say the D in there. There's no D sound in aventure. Aventure, no D sound at all. But then the scholars in the 17th century decided to add a D sound to that word, because it comes from Latin adventura. Adventura has a D, so they decided that we should add a D to aventure. And aventure became adventure with a D sound. I said with a D sound because that's one example when spelling started to influence the pronunciation of the word. So even though before the 17th century the English never said the D sound, since the scholars of the 17th century inserted a D to aventure, we now started to say that D in adventure. People start to say adventure because of that D in the word. So the spelling of words are started to actually influence the way we say some of the words. People do make mistakes. Talk to you about these scholars of the 17th century adding these B's and D's to words because they are from Latin. And they did the same with the word island. The word island comes from, according to the scholars, Isla. They thought island came from Latin isla, so because it came from Latin isla, isla as an S, we should put an S to island, so they put an S to island, I-S-L-A-N-D. Except that they make a mistake. They made a mistake because island is not from Latin. The word island is not from Latin. The word isle, I-S-L-E, is from Latin isla, yeah, but island is not. Island is from Old English. Old English, England or Yegland. And in England or Yegland, we don't have a S sound, we don't have an S at all. It was England or Yegland. But due to that mistake that the scholars made in the 17th century, we now have an S in Ireland. And we're stuck with that S. Now, as I mentioned earlier, once we have decided on the standard spelling, it is very, very difficult to change the spelling of a word. It's practically set in stone, doesn't change. There are a few people who want to reform the spelling of the words. There were a few attempts over the years to reform the spelling. I mentioned the reform in America, but that only touched very, very few words. And there were other attempts in the 20th century to change the spelling of words, but nothing much has been done. Now the question is, should we change the spelling? Should our spelling be closer to pronunciation? The answer to that question is, well, it's not that simple. It's not that simple because the question is, which pronunciation should we follow if you want to reform the English spelling? Because how do you say that word? H-O-U-S-E. How do you say it? I say it house, but if you live in Australia, how do you say that word? What about New Zealand? What about America? What about Canada? What about Scotland? Ireland? How do you say that word? Which pronunciation should we follow? And if other countries like the States, Canada, Australia, decided to actually have a different spelling that is closer to their own pronunciation, then we're going to start to have English spelling that is different from British spelling. So we will have a different spelling system for Australia, America, Canada, maybe Scotland if they decided to do that, England, and so on and so on. Now the advantage to have a standard spelling is that however you say the word, the spelling is the same. So however you say the word house or any other words in the world, in England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, America, and so on, however you say it, we will still understand the written word. So a book printed in England can be understood in Canada, Australia, and so on and so on, even though the pronunciation is a bit different. And that is why it is difficult to change the spelling of words. If we start changing the spelling of words to how it is pronounced, we will start having books with different spelling system, and at some point we may have to have translators. So books printed in America, for example, they use their own spelling system, may need to be translated into British English because their spelling system may be quite different from the British spelling system, and we will no longer be able to read an American book. Now, as I mentioned earlier, some people say that English is the most difficult language in the world. And that's probably because of the spelling. Because spelling is not that easy. But keep in mind that it's not just English language that have difficulties with their own spelling. Other languages have their own systems in relation to spelling. And they have their own way of spelling words that, is not that easy. For example, consider the French word saint. How do you spell saint? Well, there are actually 5 different spellings for saint. And they all have different meanings. Saint in French can be spelled this way, this way, this way, this way, or this way. And they all mean something different. English is not the only language that have what we call homophones, words that sound the same but have different spellings. French does have homophones too. Thank you.